Welcome to My Naturally Sweetened Life. Let's make pressure canned mushrooms. Before we get to the canning process, we have to do some prep work. First, decide what jars you're going to use, and then wash them in hot, soapy water. This is the perfect time to inspect your jars, making sure that there are no cracks or chips, especially at the top where your lid will sit. For this recipe, you can either use a half-pint jar or a pint jar. It's really up to you and how much you use mushrooms. For today, I'm going to use the half-pint jars because I'm canning them to specifically use them on our pizza every week. If I was canning for the purpose of using it for a recipe like beef stroganoff, I would probably use the pint jar. Next, we need to prep our mushrooms. I bought my mushrooms from Sam's Club, and each package is 24 ounces. So that means I'm going to can 6 pounds of mushrooms today. I try to choose the freshest looking mushrooms that they had available. But they are very dirty, so I'm going to rip open these packages, put the mushrooms in the water, and give them a good wash. And you will see just how dirty the water is. Once all the mushrooms are in the water, I just put my hands in and agitate the mushrooms back and forth. The goal is to break free all of the dirt that is stuck in the gills of the mushroom, because we don't want any of that to be in our canning jars. This is what the water looks like after rinsing the mushrooms. It's pretty gross. Put a large pot of water on the stove and start to bring it up to a boil while we work on the mushrooms. I also have my canner sitting over here on medium heat, and I'm heating up the water because the mushrooms are going to be hot. That water inside is going to be hot, so I don't have any fear of my jars breaking. Make sure to follow your manufacturer's guide for how much water to put in your canner. The next step for the mushrooms is to cut them into slices. And while I'm doing that, I want to make sure I mention that before you can start pressure canning, you need to know what elevation that you live in. It matters. It can change what pressure you can at and also the timing. So I will leave a link in the description below so that you can go check that out if you don't know. Also, I will leave a link in the description for My Naturally Sweetened Life, and I have a full printable recipe if you like to print that out and have it in your recipe binder. Okay, now that I have all my mushrooms chopped and my water has come to a boil, I'm going to put my mushrooms in, and then we're going to bring it back up to a boil and let them boil for 5 minutes. And it looks like I'm putting a ginormous amount of mushrooms in here, but they're going to shrink. So I'm putting in enough that I can still push the mushrooms under the water and they will be able to boil. I'm not going to stuff this pan too much, but it's just enough so I can push them down into the water. Now that the water is boiling, I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes. Use a slotted spoon to lift the mushrooms from the water and place them into your prepared jars. I like to put the mushrooms first and then use a spoon to press them down so that I can get an accurate 1-inch headspace. And then I will pour the water on top of the mushrooms. And as you can see, I am clearly on the struggle bus with these little half-pint jars. I'm used to canning with pints and quarts, so these little guys fill up so quickly. I kept having to rearrange the mushrooms. So once the mushrooms are in the jar, use your spoon to press them gently down to make sure that you get a good amount of mushrooms in the jar. Pour the hot liquid over the mushrooms, and again filling up to 1-inch headspace. Debubble your jar. This just means I'm using a butter knife just to move around the mushrooms and get all the air pockets out of the jar. You definitely will need to adjust your headspace after doing this. You might have to take some out or put some in. It just depends on how much air pockets you had in the jar. A good little jar of mushrooms, and we'll just keep repeating this process until all the mushrooms are used from that pot. Use a clean, damp cloth to wipe the rims of the jars just to make sure there's nothing that's going to come between the jar and your lid. canning mushrooms isn't too messy, but I just want to make sure that I get a good seal. I like to use Superb canning lids because they have a really good seal rate, and they're actually made right here in Ohio. I am not affiliated with them, but I do love using them. They're very nice. After the lids, you put on the rings and just gently twirl on the ring, not too tight, and place them into the canner. Now put the lid onto the canner and lock it into place. Because the jars and the water are hot already, it shouldn't take long for a steady stream of steam to come out of that pipe. I think you can see that. There's a steady stream of steam coming out, and I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes and let the canner vent. Place the weight on the vent, and once it rocks back and forth, start the timer for 45 minutes. Once the 45 minutes is up, turn the heat off and leave the canner alone and let it come down to 0 pressure all on its own. The rocker or the weight will stop rocking back and forth, and the little button in the back will drop down. Once that happens, take the lid, open it up just a little, and leave it on top of the canner until it cools. And then about 5 minutes later, you can start bringing out the mushrooms. This helps reduce siphoning, where the cold air from the outside of the canner pulls that water out of your jar, and you just do not want that to happen. So giving your canner a few extra minutes to cool really helps with that process. Use your jar grabbers to lift the jars out of the canner and onto a towel-lined countertop. Let the jars cool completely, then check for a good seal, remove the rings because you don't need them anymore, and then wash the outside of your jars, label them, and store them in a cool, dry place for up to a year. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.